Hello people, in this video you will see me removing a Mazda Tribute engine and sliding it out from underneath the car. I'll take you through each step of the process and show you what to do and how easy it can be done. As this is a fairly long video, I've decided to split it and put it up as two separate videos, so make sure you look out for part 2 of the engine removal process. Also, can you please spend the time to subscribe and give my videos a thumbs up and leave a comment as well. This does give me the encouragement to make these videos. With the engine cover removed, I can remove the few bolts that secure the accelerator cable and the cruise control cable, should your model be fitted with cruise control, and just disconnect that from the throttle body. I just get the cables and just push them to the side, and just to keep them out of the way while I'm continuing to work. Moving on to undo the battery, it's just a matter of removing the bolts that hold the clamp that clamp the battery securely down and removing the battery terminals. Getting this out of the way early on will just prevent me from setting tools across those battery terminals and causing any arcing or any issues. It's good practice to always remove the battery first up. The battery tray itself will also need to be removed. There's just a few bolts underneath there. There is also a number of plastic clips and scrivets, and there may be some wiring that's been cable tied to the battery tray. Sometimes you just need to cut these away or carefully pry them apart so you can put it back together. Just continuing on that side of the engine, just removing the ducting and the pipework around the air filter and the throttle body. Make sure you disconnect the MAF sensor here. I try and leave as much as I can together, but sometimes you do need to pull things apart. Good time to check the air filter. This one was actually pretty clean in this one, which was surprising because the car had very little maintenance. I'm also removing the other half of that air cleaner just to make it easier to get into that side of the engine and just to see any piping or wiring that needs to be disconnected. There is a major plug up on the firewall where most of the engine wiring loom is connected. It's just a simple 10mm bolt. Once that's undone, that plug unclips. There are a few earth points around that side of the engine there, particularly where the battery was. So you want to go around and undo those earth points. There are a number of clips or cable ties holding this wiring to body panels. Just methodically work your way through and undo all those clips. We can see here there is the fuse box. There are two main cables that come up into the fuse box. Once these are undone, that pretty well separates most of the loom from the wiring in and around the battery. These two plugs here, they actually can't be mixed up when you put them back. It's a bit hard to see in the video, but the design and the shape of the metal tabs make it impossible to mix it up when you put it back together. It's important to keep checking here that all the wiring has been undone. Nothing is more frustrating than when you begin to lower the engine to find that the wiring is still attached to the body or somehow caught up. There is a fair bit of wiring above the transmission on that side of the engine. I just try and push it all over and just clip it around an engine part or something, and we can begin to see here in the video that the wiring has now separated from the body, and you can start to see that there's a gap so that that engine can drop down. It's also time to start thinking about some of the pipe work that is connected to the engine that needs to be removed. So there was the brake booster pipe, there's some fuel lines, there's some evaporative lines, and a number of pipes that just need to be disconnected and removed. I don't bother marking these sorts of pipes anymore. From memory, I'm pretty good at putting it back together, and also I find too that a little bit of logic, you can quickly work it out again, and it's very rare to find things that will fit together incorrectly once you lay them all out and put them all back. Now just at the very bottom of the screen here, I'm just removing two brackets that sit on the front of the car because I need to remove the bumper bar on this car because I wanted to remove the radiator. This particular engine had a hole in the radiator, so the radiator was being replaced. To remove the engine, you would not have to remove the radiator. It would make it easier, but you would not have to do it if you chose to leave the radiator in. Moving away now from underneath the bonnet and starting to look underneath the car, I'm removing the plastic scrivets that hold the inner guard onto the bumper bar and just removing the main screw that holds the top of the bumper bar in place. This will be done on both sides. Once this is done on both sides, we'll be free to begin to remove the bumper bar. Don't forget though, there are a few more clips underneath, and it seemed to go from scrivets to screws to little bolts. A little bit frustrating that wasn't all the same type of fitting, but you know, look, we can work around that. Just methodically work your way through. Remember, this is happening on both sides, and this was just so I could remove the bumper bar itself. There are a number of clips under these plastics here that had to be removed also to remove the bumper bar. With all the clips and the screws removed, you're now able to remove the bumper bar assembly itself. Now remember, again, I was only doing this just because I needed to replace a radiator. This is the quickest and easiest way that I've found to get the radiator out of these particular model cars. Remember, if your radiator is in good condition, you could leave it in place and drop the engine out underneath. It might be a little bit tight sometimes, because even with the radiator removed, it was quite tight and difficult for me at different points. But you could, I believe you could do it, and maybe next time I'll give it a try with the radiator still in place. It'll save the work of removing the bumper. I'm just now disconnecting a few more of the cables, pipes and wiring that's going to the fans of the radiator. Also need to disconnect the automatic transmission tubes and a few of the cooling pipes. And I'm wanting to remove the plastic fans out, and they can just be slid up. They do try and catch up on a few things here, but look, a little bit of patience and you can slide it up and slide it out. I believe here I also had taken off the latch that holds down the bonnet as well. You can begin to see with these out, there starts to be a whole lot more room in the front of the engine for you to work. With the cooling fans removed, there's now a little bit more space to remove all the heater hose piping. This has just a number of clips, and there's a number of different join points here, so whichever join comes apart easier is probably the best one to use. A number of these joints for mine were very tight, and I didn't want to cut the piping because I wanted to reuse it as it was in relatively good condition. Once all those heater hoses are removed, the radiator then can just be slid upwards and out of the car. Remember again that the radiator, it does not have to be removed to remove the engine. I just did it because the radiator needed to be replaced as it was leaking, and it just gave me a little bit more room to video what I was doing. Now, doing some work underneath the car. I have the car on a set of stands, so it's up fairly high. I'm just beginning by removing the exhaust. These bolts were very tight. I had soaked them because I knew that they were quite badly rusted. The first one came off okay, and as you watch the video you'll see what happened to the second one, which did cause me a little bit of grief, and I had to sort that problem out later. And we can see here that the bolt has sheared off with the stud in there. That's a little bit of a problem for later on, but at the moment we'll just keep moving on. With the exhaust now free, you can just separate those two things so they don't get hung up on each other when you go to remove the engine. Keep that gasket aside. Being the metal gasket, you could probably get away with reusing that. Here is now the rear drive shaft. It has a Torx bit that fits into it. Now, I had the front of the car jacked up and on stands, so the back of the car was still on its wheels, so I couldn't rotate this drive shaft. But I found that I was able to get all of those 6 Torx bits out without having to rotate it. A little bit difficult to get the ones at the top there, but I just went around and just squeezed in my impact wrench. You can see here the drive shaft now comes out, and look, that can just sit like that until you're ready to remove the engine. It won't get caught up or hung up on that at all. There will be some grease in the end of there. Sometimes it can be a little bit oily, a bit of oil can drip out, so just be aware. Whilst you're working under this part of the engine, it's a great time to drain the oil and also the transmission fluid that's not shown, and also remove some of those plastics that are just underneath the engine and the drip tray there, just to make sure it's a little bit easier to work on. I find draining the oil out will make sure that I don't have a problem later on when I'm trying to get rid of that engine, that it doesn't tip over in the workshop and spill oil everywhere. There's some of the plastics that I'm just loosening. Can't get them all off right now. Some of those bolts are accessible from in underneath the wheel arch, but I just get the bolts that I can get to easily whilst I'm underneath the car. That concludes part 1 of my video. Make sure you click the link to watch part 2 and leave any comments or questions below. Thanks for watching.